Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios. It's Football at 4.
Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. And, of course, we're brought to you today by Jersey Shore Federal Credit Union. Make the switch and bank with your only community credit union. Jersey Shore Federal Credit Union offers some of the lowest loan rates around, including refinancing. Learn more at jerseyshorefcu.org. Andrew DiCecco is here. He'll be on Radio Row in Arizona for InsideTheBirds.com. And obviously, Football at 4 is back with a look at the Eagles and the Chiefs. There's only one game left. And by the way, we'll bring Andrew in and start off with this news. Adam Schefter tweeting a little while ago that Eagles offensive coordinator Shane Steichen is scheduled to have his second head coaching interview with the Colts on Saturday. So we keep talking about, Jerry Jones made comments, Julian Love made comments that we can get into with Andrew. But this could be, Jerry Jones's comments kind of insinuated that this team better win because the future could be, downhill for them, a la the Rams, which I don't quite agree with. But this could be a possibility that Shane Steichen leaves if they, in fact, win a game like this. So, we take a look at this team and where they are. How important, Andrew, do you think getting this one is for this organization the way they are set up?
Well, it's an interesting question, right, Mike? Because I was actually asked who's facing more pressure going into this game, the Chiefs or the Eagles? And I say the Eagles, one, because of what you outlined, the coaching staff may have an altered dynamic next season. There's a lot of free agents coming up. And when you look at what the Eagles were able to do this season, stacking up a 14-3 record, compiling all these accolades throughout the season, you had a quarterback who was an MVP candidate for much of the season, and you racked up 70 sacks and et cetera, et cetera. I think that it's almost become expected that the Eagles are going to win this, not only be in it, but win this game. So I think anything less would be a little bit disappointing. And now you're facing a hobbled quarterback in Patrick Mahomes, and he had, outside of Travis Kelce, they have sort of an undermanned offense. So now it's, if you're the Eagles, you're the Titans of the NFL. I think you need to deliver on the big stage, which they've continued to do throughout the postseason, but you want to see it correlate into the biggest game of the year.
We were talking right before you came on, Andrew. This is a team that's 16-3. If you include the playoffs, they 6 All-Pros. They essentially don't have a weakness anywhere. Why is it, do you think that some people, because we were asking, if you are one of those fans or somebody out there that says, well, the Eagles haven't beaten anybody and they have the easiest path, what is it about this team that maybe they see that people who believe in them don't? Like, is there a weak spot on this team that we're all missing? Like, if you say they haven't beaten anybody, what about this team makes people feel that maybe they are not deserving of the accolades they are getting?
Well, it's certainly lonely at the top. When you are the top dog for much of the NFL, for the entirety of the NFL season, people are going to poke and prod and try and find ways to kind of poke holes into what you've done to be successful and try and figure out, is it the coaches, is it the system, et cetera. You've heard it all season long. Everyone trying to sort of make excuses or figure out what's making the Eagles, what's steering that ship. And I think if you're looking at it, Mike, I guess objectively, if you look at it, Howie Roseman is essentially provided all the ingredients that the coaching staff needed to be successful. But you also have to give credit to the coaching staff for maximizing those ingredients and putting together a hell of a meal and being able to deliver on that. Because how many times have we seen teams assembled in the off season, be it free agency or through the draft, and all of a sudden they look like they're brimming with talent and poised for the Super Bowl? I can think of the Cleveland Browns in recent history, and they're just not able to kind of gel and come together and deliver when it matters most. So I guess if you're looking at it from the Eagles' perspective or from an outside perspective, I don't know what you can really say, because you got to credit the quarterback for a lot of the success, and he was the one that really drove his own success in the offseason, putting in the work. So I think that the Eagles deserve all the credit. The coaching staff, Howie Roseman, won the 5-3. They deserve all the credit for being where they are right now.
Andrew, you look at let's look at the quarterback here for a second, because You wrote a great article available on InsideTheBirds.com detailing Jalen Hurts and just his path, man, right? You look at him and getting drafted in Philly, 53rd overall. A lot of fans didn't even like that choice. He was a backup, really not a non-thought, a non-factor. Even just 4 years ago, he was benched on the biggest stage and watched his team go on to win the national championship in Alabama. And look where he is now. Just give us the insight into what you wrote about regarding his story.
Yeah, he's been through so much, and it was only a year ago that they got ran off the field, Ryan, by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the wild card round, and there he stood, 24 years old, one game away from the Super Bowl on Sunday, and he didn't blink, he didn't waver. You wouldn't be able to tell from looking at him during warm-ups that this was the biggest game of his NFL career to date. And I thought that his remarkable poise and just the ice water running through his veins, and that really kind of peeks behind the curtain, gives you a peek behind the curtain as to why that veteran-laden locker room is so inclined to follow his lead. I mean, he has the entirety, the command of that entire locker room, which is incredibly hard to do, especially at being 24 years old. And I think that he's just been through so much that he wants it. He wants it more than the average player. I think that he's driven by winning and driven by success, and he puts in the work, and he was going to make sure that he capitalized the moment, right? You always hear him talk about, how do you want to be remembered? This is the opportunity of a lifetime, I believe, is something that he said multiple times. And that's not lost on him. And I think that he really just made the most of the opportunity and was able to deliver by any means necessary. He only threw for, 125 yards or something like that. He doesn't care about the stats. He cares about winning, putting the team in best position to be successful, and doing whatever it takes. And, I think that deserves a lot of recognition, because for a lot of young players, you don't often see those kind of traits and mentality.
Yeah, we have a head coach that obviously has never dealt with just everything that is surrounding your team when you're waiting to kick off for a Super Bowl matchup. Same thing with the quarterback, as we're discussing, youngest Eagles quarterback to reach the Super Bowl. But the mentality and the poise and the focus in this locker room is what I want you to touch on. And I know you wrote about this. I know you talked to James Bradbury about, the job's not done. And just give us the insight, peel the curtain back a little bit on just the laser focus that this team still is having, because the job isn't done.
Yeah, that's the resounding message. You saw a lot of elation in that locker room, Ryan, don't get me wrong, after the game, but you also, the resounding message was, we still have one more. And Bradbury said, the most important one. That's not lost on anyone. No one's resting on their laurels or getting complacent. And that all comes from the messaging of your head coach and your quarterback. How many times has Jalen Hurts sat there on the podium and say, the job's not done, we left money on the table, we're taking things day by day? That has been, it might sound like player speak or something to that effect, but this is what they're actually living and living by throughout the week in practice. And if you see how they conduct themselves after the game, and even when they're winning in the manner that they are, they blew the Giants out and they blew the 49ers out. They're still focused on the next step. And I really do think that collectively they all share a like-minded goal and mindset. And I think that's really powerful when you look at it. And that's what makes this team so special. Is that it would be so easy, Ryan, for them to look forward, even in week 12 or 13 when they're rolling up on these teams and say, we're going to get to the Super Bowl. But they really took it one step at a time, and even in the playoffs, they've done the same thing. So I wouldn't be too worried about their focus and preparation leading into the Super Bowl. I think that the coaching staff is pushing all the right buttons, and they have the right leaders in place to ensure that the focus isn't lost.
Andrew DiCecco covers the Eagles for InsideTheBirds.com. Give him a follow on Twitter at @DiCeccoNFL. I want to get to just a couple of thoughts as we now wait and anxiously wait for this game between the Eagles and the Kansas City Chiefs. Something you and I believe, talked about a week ago to the day is the running back room and Kenneth Gainwell and Miles Sanders. Gainwell once again looked pretty sharp, and it was a game that was certainly one-sided in favor of Philly, of course. But what do you make of Gainwell's back-to-back performances now in two playoff games that were lopsided? Is he going to continue to have a significant role and get a good chunk of the carries and volume?
It kind of reminds me of that. It's kind of his resurgence has been sort of Corey Clement-esque, right, in that 2017 run. I do think that you're going to see him take on a more sizable role in this in the Super Bowl, and Boston Scott for that matter as well. The Eagles have 3 running backs with varying skill sets and diversified skill sets, and I think that you're going to see the Eagles deploy them in the ways that best suit the offense and fits their roles. And Kenny Gainwell, he looks very explosive, right? And he's fresh. He didn't necessarily have the best regular season. He was a player that I thought was really going to take the reins in year 2 and emerge. So I consider him sort of an underwhelming second season. But when it counts, he's really delivered down the stretch. So I think that he's going to have a role, and his snap count has really risen throughout the latter stages of the season. Boston Scott has a role. He's pretty good in short yardage, and he has a nose for the end zone. And then Miles Sanders is the top back, and he's what makes everything go. And they all have specified roles, and that's how they've been able to keep all these guys fresh. They're not nicked up. I mean, they're about as healthy as you could be at this stage of the season. So I think that you're going to see that 3-headed rushing attack, kind of like back in the day when they had Buck Halter, Deuce Staley, and Brian Westbrook.
Andrew DiCecco, a little football at 4. I know when we talk to you next week, and we'll all be out in Arizona, we'll have a good chance to kind of sit and just kind of chop it all up. But initially, give me, we talk about Philadelphia and what they do. They can run the ball, man. I mean, I feel like if they want to run the ball, San Francisco is one of the best, if not the best run defense, statistically speaking, they are in the league. If San Francisco has problems stopping the Eagles' run, how does that bode for Kansas City's defense?
Yeah, I think that needs to be their approach. And the one thing that I'm enamored with in this matchup, guys, is the Eagles' offensive line versus the defensive line of the Kansas City Chiefs that's anchored by Chris Jones, who had 15.5 sacks, 29 quarterback hits. He's had an excellent season, but I want to see how Jason Kelce is able to rise to the occasion. You also have to look at Landon Dickerson with that hyperextended right elbow and his effectiveness in that game, and I think that the battle is really going to be won in the trenches, particularly along the interior, and I think that those 3 have been the unsung heroes of the postseason for the Eagles: Isaac Seumalo, Jason Kelce, and Landon Dickerson. So I want to see how they're able to wall off some of these guys and pave their running lanes, and if they're able to kind of keep up with that success, or if Kansas City's going to try and find a way to counter that, because I think that those 3 players have been the most have sort of been the catalyst to that running game. So that's really what I'm going to be looking at.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I mentioned it the last couple of weeks. The Eagles' interior of the offensive line has just absolutely, and that's one thing you can't quantify what they do. These other teams can't. Like last week, Cincinnati's offensive line is in shambles, and Kansas City takes advantage of that, and it helps them win that game. They cannot go into this game against Philadelphia and think that the same game plan is going to work, because the Eagles' offensive line is not the Bengals' offensive line. So they have to come up with a different way to think that their defense is going to keep them competitive in this game, don't they?
Oh, absolutely. And then the other side of that coin is the Eagles' defensive line is going to pose a lot of trouble for the Chiefs. I mean, look at this. The matchup that I'm looking at, and I have circled, is right tackle Andrew Wiley trying to contend with Hassan Reddick, who has 3.5 sacks through the postseason, 19.5 on the season. And I think that if there was a player who could win MVP outside of Jalen Hurts, if the Eagles were to win this game, it would be Hassan Reddick. The Eagles have a lot of favorable matchups on the defensive line versus the Chiefs' offensive line. And the Chiefs' O-line is not a slouch by any stretch, guys, by the way. But I just like the Eagles' matchups on both sides of the line.
Yeah, it's that. You hit the nail on the head there. Their offensive line is good. The one spot they have a question is the one spot the Eagles have just tortured Evan Neal, Mike McGlinchey, and this might be another week where Hassan Reddick has got the favorable matchup. Andrew DiCecco, I guess one favorable matchup if you're Kansas City, and I want to get your expository on this, would be the middle of the field. They got Travis Kelce, and that's one area where I guess you could look at the Eagles and say, how? Because we never saw what they were going to do with Kittle last week. They never got a shot. They never threw the ball. Right. So how does Philadelphia try to handle Kelce?
Well, knowing that he is their bona fide playmaker, the one who can create the explosive plays, I think you have to sell out to stop him. Now, I don't think you can afford to be overly aggressive. I think you have to play them straight up. Obviously, I don't anticipate a ton of man coverage, but I would expect maybe a C.J. Gardner-Johnson, who, if you remember last week when I mentioned him as the guy that I would deploy against George Kittle, I think that would make a lot of sense, knowing that he's just that pesky, scrappy, tough player that always seems to be in the hip pocket of the receiver, and I think that he's probably best equipped to do that. I certainly don't think that you would want a Kaiser White on him, although he might be my secondary option, but you certainly don't want him to get isolated on like a T.J. Edwards. That's when things become dicey. Like you said, we didn't get a chance to see what they were able to do with George Kittle, but knowing that Travis Kelce, knowing the kind of impact he can have on a game, I'm putting C.J. Gardner-Johnson on him. And it's even more so knowing that you have Avonte Maddox, who's healthy or at least somewhat healthy. That sort of allows Jonathan Gannon to be a little bit more flexible in how he deploys his back-end personnel.
Andrew, what's the most important option here that I'm about to give you? If you have to pick one has the most weight on their shoulders or could have the most impact on the game. A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith. Running backs, Miles Sanders, Gainwell, and Boston Scott. Or on defense, the secondary or the D-line, right? Like, so is it the pass rush? Is it defending Mahomes in the passing attack, or is it the ground or the passing attack for the Eagles offensively, if you can follow all that?
Well, I think in this particular, every game is unique, Ryan. And in this case, I think that the Eagles are really going to have to take to the air in order to go strike for strike with the Chiefs. The Chiefs are a quick strike offense. And obviously last week, the key to victory was running the football, milking that clock and preserving the health of your players and moving on to the next week. But I think this week is going to be next week is going to be a big game, in my opinion, for A.J. Brown. I think he's due for an explosive matchup. Or explosive game, and I think that when you look at what they have from a corner perspective, they have L'Jarius Sneed, who I do like, and he's about 6'1", 190, pretty physical. On the other side, they have Trent McDuffie. If you remember, we talked about him throughout the draft process last year. Goes about 5'11", shorter arms, and I think you're going to have if you're able to kind of get A.J. and isolate A.J. on him, there could be some explosive plays had down the field. And really, that's what the Eagles are going to have to do. They're going to have to test them deep early because they're not going to be able to necessarily afford to go on these 12, 13, 15 play drives against this Kansas City.
All right, it looks like Josh said that we lost him on the phone, so it must have been his phone dropping there. And there's Andrew DiCecco from InsideTheBirds.com. They're going to be out there all week, so we'll have live football at 4s next week. I talked to Mosher. And they're going to try. They're doing a lot of content from noon to 4.
Okay.
And then at 4 o'clock, the guys are going to jump over, and we're going to kind of do a bunch of football at 4, maybe 2 and 3, and a bunch of the guys together. So, and by the way, we'll get a first chance to actually meet Andrew DiCecco. How about that? I've never actually met the man before. All these years, Andrew, we've talked, never had a chance to meet the man, but we'll meet him at in Arizona next week. So you were saying?
Where did you lose me?
Good question. That's definitely a fair question.
You were basically you were breaking down the secondary of the Chiefs there.
Okay. Yeah. So L'Jarius Sneed's a player that they have from the cornerback spot. He has over 100 tackles, 3 sacks. Physical player, 6'1", good length. But then on the other side, you have Trent McDuffie, who goes about 5'11", has shorter arms, and I think that he could be had. Especially with a player who has the big-bodied frame and the contested catchability of an A.J. Brown. He's due for a blow-up spot. I think that this is the week that it happens, and I think you're going to see Jalen try to go to him early, especially on those slant routes, and sort of allow him to take advantage of his after-the-catch ability. And like I said, the Eagles really do need to have a pass-heavy approach, in my opinion, in this game to keep pace with this high-powered Kansas City offense.
Andrew, as we just mentioned, we will see you in Arizona. Great breakdown as always. The Eagles and the Chiefs, Inside the Birds, they'll be doing a ton of content in Arizona, and then we'll talk to them right around 4 o'clock each day, as we always do on Football at 4 here on the Sports Bash. Now I hear a rumor that you and Kerr are shacking up together. Is that accurate?
Yeah, and Josh asked me how am I going to contend with his running every morning, and I said, running? I was like, you mean running or running his mouth? I said, which one are you talking about?
Who gets the top bunk?
Right, exactly. All right, well, we will see you. Safe travels, man, and we will see you in Arizona.
Looking forward to it. Talk soon, guys.